Greetings children, I am Sunil Kumar Lakshmanan, PGT English from Jawahar Navodaya Vidyalaya, Kannur, Kerala in Hyderabad region. This video lesson is for class 12 CBSE students. We are dealing with the lesson Going Places from your textbook Flamingo. In this short video, we will discuss some of the life skills and literary devices that we can learn from the lesson Going Places. This story centers around a character named Sophie. Let us start this lesson with one quote. Castles in the air, they are so easy to take refuge in and so easy to build it too. So the protagonist of the story, Sophie, the entire events and plot centers around the central character, Sophie. She is a builder of castles in the air. So this lesson gives us a lot of materials to know the life skills and some literary devices used in this lesson. Let us check what are the life skills we can learn from this lesson. The first and foremost life skill that we have to learn after understanding this lesson is the difference between subjective reality and objective reality. What is this subjective reality and what is this objective reality? That we will discuss in the coming sections. Another concept of hero worship and fantasizing things and escapism from reality. These concepts in literature can also be learned through this lesson. Then differentiate the real world and the romantic world. That is another life skill we have to learn. The ability to differentiate the romantic world and the realistic world. And some of the literary skills. What are the literary skills we can learn from this lesson? Let us check. First, the use of objective correlative in stories. This literary device is well used in the story Going Places. We can learn what is this objective correlative from the story. Then presenting a character in foil of another. Contrasting character presentation in literature. That literary skill also we can learn from this lesson. Now let us check the title of the story. Going Places. What does it mean? Going Places is an idiomatic phrase which refers to a promising young person's likelihood of becoming successful and famous. So going places simply means to become successful and famous in life. Simply we can say that to become a celebrity in the society. That is going places. To become successful. That is Going Places. Let us check the title. The title Going Places captures the essence of the story. Sophie, the protagonist of the story, is always imagining of going places, of being rich and famous, and it is from this point of reference that we can understand her nature and the reason why she acts the way she does. So this title itself tells us what is the content of the story. The central character, the protagonist, a teenage school-going girl, she wants to going places, being rich and famous. And The other hero worship, fantasizing, everything depends on this title, going places. She wants to become famous. She wants to become a celebrity in her society. So this story tells us what is the real world and what is the world of fantasy. So the story tells us we have to get the ability to differentiate subjective reality and objective reality. So let us check what is this subjective reality and what is this objective reality and how can they connect it together. That life skill we can learn from this lesson. Let us move. Going places, that gives us subjective reality versus objective reality. Let us learn what does this mean, this subjective reality and this objective reality. Let's move. Subjective reality decided by not through our senses but through our belief system, our emotions and our desires, our assumptions, which simply means that what is the inner world of every one of us that determines the subjective reality of the world that resides in our mental world. So subjective reality is the reality that we create in our inner world. Let us check what is this objective reality. Objective reality simply means what exactly is the world. What is the physical reality? What are the simple facts? That is called objective reality. The central character Sophie, she lives in the subjective reality world and she can't understand and differentiate the objective world just outside her mental world. So that creates certain problems with the character, with the protagonist. That is the interesting part of this story. Let's move. Looking reality through personal assumptions and dreams. That is the trouble. That is the subjective reality. Looking reality through personal assumptions and dreams. When we started seeing things through our personal assumptions, there creates our subjective reality. Come to the story. When we analyze the story, at the beginning itself, we get a conversation between Sophie and Jancy, two school-going teenagers. They are coming back from their school and they are conversing each other. Here, Sophie's conversation with Jancy in the beginning of the story hints at her tendency to romanticize about the future. She is indecisive. In the conversation, we get the idea that she is indecisive. Indecisive here means she doesn't come to a conclusion, a decision. She remains indecisive about her career, switches from owning a boutique to being an actress or to being a fashion designer because she has to do something sophisticated. The protagonist Sophie wants to start or to become something sophisticated. Sophisticated means that something intellectually appealing. Intellectually appealing. She wants to do something like that in her life. So, the central character, Sophie, she romanticizes things. She is indecisive about her career. She likes to do something sophisticated. These are the three things we can learn from the first episode of the story. about the protagonist. She always romanticizes things. She lives far away from the realities of the world. Even though her friend Jansi reminds her what is the reality just in front of them, she can't understand. When she wants to become a manager or a fashion designer like Mary Conde or an actress, then Jansi, her friend, reminds her it is not an easy job. And to begin a boutique in the city, it is not an easy task. It requires a lot of money, Jansi reminds her. Then she says, then she wants to become the manager of a firm. Then who does make her straight off a manager of a firm? One side, Jansi, a foil to this romanticized character of Sophie, asking questions of a reality. But the protagonist lives in the subjective world of her own. That is what the story tells us. In the second scene, when she comes back to her house, her vague dreams that vanishes. Because once again she comes back to the real world. The real world of hers doesn't give her the comfort of that dream, the fantasy world. The story gives us evidences. The small cluttered house she lives in shows that her economic condition is not at all sound. So once the description we get from her house, the readers realize that the cluttered house she lives in, and it tells the readers her economic situation is not so sound. This is a drastic change of world Sophie inhabits. So here we can see the conflict between the subjective reality and the objective reality of the protagonist. Here we can see the objective reality versus subjective reality. The conflict can be seen throughout the story. And this conflict of subjectivity and objectivity can be seen throughout the story. That is the interest of the story, going places. The moment she opens the door of her house, she is rudely awakened to the harsh reality she lives in, and all her castles built in the air collapse. When she enters her house, she enters the world of reality. Once she enters the world of reality, the castle she builds in the air that collapses. She can't adjust with the reality of her life that we can see in the story. Consequently, she feels a little tightening on her throat. The story tells us this tightening that Sophie feels in the middle of the conversation with her father. That tightening indicates she can't adjust with the physical reality of her life. Her constant fantasizing of things, therefore, is not only a means of deriving pleasure, but is also her desperate attempt at escaping from the reality she lives in. This is the reality, as a reader, we can get out of these evidences from the story. The protagonist wants to derive pleasure from her fantasizing. Not only that, she wants to escape from the realities of her life. Her fantasizing and hero worship is also a means of escapism. And other fantasizing nature of this girl and her hero worship of the prodigy, the Irish prodigy footballer Danny Casey. All these are part of escapism from the harsh realities of life. In the story, one sight that particularly arrested her attention. That is, Sophie watched her back, stooped over the sink, wondered at the incongruity of the delicate bow which fastened her apron strings, the delicate seeming bow and the crooked back. Here we get the prominent literary device of objective correlative, A.R. Barton used in the story. The sight that get the attraction of Sophie is her mother. Her mother is washing the dishes, stooping over the sink, and she wears an apron. The apron strings make a beautiful, a delicate bow-shaped tie behind her back. And that delicate seeming bow and her crooked back, the mismatch of the two worlds, the subjective world of Sophie and the objective world there, that conflict is presented through this objective correlative. The delicate seeming bow represents the beautiful dreams of Sophie that inappropriate with her real world. The mismatch between the world of reality and the world of fantasy is brought out through this objective correlative, the delicate seeming bow and the crooked back of her mother. So, the web of her dreams and the delicate bow are reflecting each other their existence. This is the beauty the story gives the reader. Really, the reader is provided an object where Sophie's emotion is projected. Sophie has also just witnessed the crooked back of reality. The reality's back is always crooked. She can't digest it. Her small, cluttered house, where the presence of her delicate dreams is completely out of place. The incongruity of the delicate bow, the inappropriateness of the delicate bow with the crooked realities is presented here through this objective correlative. This technique of projecting a character's emotions into the existing physical object. So here we can see the use of the objective correlative. This literary device, how very well A.R. Barton used the objective correlative device in the story. We can see while we read the story. The delicate bow on the crooked back becomes an objective correlative of the complex emotions Sophie has at that moment. That is the significance of the event, the objective correlative. Another literary device used in the story is the presentation of a character in foil. In any narrative, a foil is a character who contrasts with another character. Typically, a character who contrasts with the protagonist in order to better highlight or differentiate certain qualities of the protagonist. So almost all characters on the opposite side of Sophie are realistically presented, and Sophie, on the other hand, is a prey of fantasy. So that contrast is very well presented throughout the story. So the best foil characterization we can see in Sophie's elder brother, Joff. Joff's character traits are completely opposite to that of Sophie's. He has seen the real world and he knows that the world is not as fantasy as it might seem to be. Here we can clearly understand the contrastive presentation of these two characters, Sophie and her brother Geoff. Sophie, on the other hand, dreams of a world waiting for her and a world rising to greet her. This is one of her fantasy, the entire world where her elder brother Geoff every day goes for work, waiting for this Sophie. And as she enters in their world, they stand up with an ovation. They stand up and they clap their hands to receive her, to greet her. This is her dream. So that contrast is well presented throughout the story with Geoff. But she is still obsessed with the idea of going places. We can get much evidences of the character's desire for going places at the end of the story. That we can see in the last section of the story, last episode of the story, especially the hero worshipping episode. When we consider that episode in the light of this desire for going places, we have to consider it as one must try to understand her hero worship of Danny Casey in this context. It is not Danny Casey, the person who interests her. It is the idea of Danny Casey which has captured her imagination. That is the difference. Not the person, but the idea of Danny Casey that captures her imagination. She does not love or consider any particular person, but she wants to fulfill her desire for going places through the imagination of Danny Casey, the Irish prodigy. This is because Danny, the football prodigy, is definitely going places, because Danny Casey is going to prove that he is going places. He is going to become famous, successful, and a celebrity. She wants to become like that. Sophie wants to go places, and Danny becomes a figure on whom she can project her desire. So here we can understand the last episode of the story like this. Sophie also wants to going places, and Danny become a figure on whom she can project her desire for going places. She has internalized the hero worship to such an extent that she seems to locate a personal connection with the player where none exists. And at the end of the story, we can understand that she loses her control over the objective reality. Her subjective reality begins to control her. That's why she goes and waits at the lover's bench in the park, waiting for the Danny Casey, an imaginary waiting. And he never going to turn up, that she realizes sometimes. And later she begins to pain herself. She says she can't bear that burden. And here we can see the conflict between subjective reality and the objective reality. And this girl, she loses her capacity to differentiate between this subjective reality and objective reality. We see the full display of this tendency by the end of the story, where Sophie believes her story and acts on it by actually going to meet Danny. That is the danger of this subjective reality if it doesn't connect with the objective reality of our life. What is more important is the display of how one's fantasy and desire colors one's perceptions and shapes reality. Sometimes our fantasy, our desire, that color our perceptions and shapes the reality. But our fantasy and desires should be connected with the real world. Otherwise, we will become like Sophie. We can't differentiate between what is the reality there and what is the fantasy is there. And what is the fantasy. So don't be like that. Though Sophie might not have met Danny, she believes that she did, to the extent of going to the park and actually expecting him to arrive at the lover's bench. This is what happening. This is what happening in the story. She starts believing in her own cooked up stories and goes in person and waiting in the lover's bench for her Danny cousin to come. This speaks volumes on the subjectivity of human experience and the perception of what constitutes the real. So this tells us the connection between subjective reality and objective. So this is the central idea the story wants to tell the readers. Subjective reality and objective reality. I will explain this subjective reality in a simple sense. You have to remember always this quote: the only thing that can grow is the thing you give energy to. This is very important when we consider subjective reality and objective reality. One best example is if you are an addicted game player in computer. Most of the virtual games related with killing people, murdering without any prick of conscience. And the children of today, they live in the world of this virtual world of subjective reality. And they think naturally this is the right way to lead a life. Sometimes they forget the objective reality there. The rules, regulations and humanity, all those things they forget. Because they can't develop the department in their head, in their mental structure, the differences between subjective reality and objective reality. In objective reality also, sometimes this subjective reality begin to control them and they lose their control over themselves and they switch over to the subjective reality and they begin to kill the human beings, the fellow beings, like in a virtual game. So it is time for each and every young generation people to know what is this subjective reality and what is this objective reality. That is why this story is given for you to study. So what we think and what we see in our inner mental world, that is the subjective reality. It may be no connection with the reality there. So we have to minimize that subjective reality with the objective reality. What is the physical world? What is the factual world? Our subjective reality should be correlated with that objective reality. That is what the lesson wants us to develop after studying this lesson. That life skill we should develop in us to minimize the difference between subjective reality and objective reality. Because sometimes this subjective reality is for our betterment and sometimes it affects us badly, like the protagonist in the story, Sophie. She, at the end of the story, can't differentiate what is the subjective reality and what is the objective reality there. What is the reality and what is the fantasy? She loses her sensibility to differentiate between real and fantasy. Don't be like that. So our perceptions should be correlated with the objective realities of our world. That is what the story wants from the readers. This is the introductory part of the lesson, Going Places. You can watch the complete explanation of the story in 5 parts along with this introduction. Thank you for watching till the end.